All right. Well, hi, everyone. Thank you so much for attending and joining us on our second day of the 2023 International E-Conference on Holocaust Memory. I'm Dr. Darren Slade. I am tonight's co-host, and I am the president of the Global Center for Religious Research. I do want to say thank you for coming out and supporting us like this. We really appreciate it, especially in these trying times where we're having a great discussion about some very deep and heavy things. So thank you for joining and being a part of that. And with that being said, I am very excited to be able to introduce to you my friend and a great scholar, Dr. Yuval Laor, who is a writer and scholar with a PhD in cultural studies on the evolution of the human capacity for religiosity. His studies include the capacity for humans to feel the emotion of awe, to be in a state of fervor, to undergo a sudden religious conversion, and to form an attachment to a belief identity. Now, he is currently working on a book titled Fervor, What Cults Teach Us About Religion and How to Navigate Awe, which may be released sometime next year. I'm very excited about this book. So, Dr. Laor, thank you so much for being here. The floor is yours.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for inviting me. Yes. So, in this talk, I'm going to talk about Holocaust memory, but I'm going to focus on the way that it can affect people, sometimes in a manipulative way, and the reactions that people have. I'm going to argue that usually Holocaust memory narratives induce trauma or traumatize people, and as such they induce awe, and awe has a lot of very strange properties, which we're going to see how they play a role in the way people react to Holocaust narratives. So let me start. So far the conference has been great, but I might be in the role of the heel. Yeah, the bad guy, because I am going to criticize a little bit of Holocaust memory. I am going to argue that people have developed a sensitivity to criticism, so I'm fully aware that, because awe brings a sensitivity to criticism, I'm fully aware that I might be running into that. So I hope everything goes smoothly. So I grew up in Israel, and none of my ancestors survived the Holocaust. I've lost two great-grandparents and the extended families of most of my grandparents. Yeah, I grew up, I was traumatized by the Holocaust since 1981, when I was 6 years old. Israel television had a TV show called Amud Ha'esh, the Pillar of Fire, where I, as a 6-year-old, and the rest of Israel was exposed to hardcore Holocaust images. And for me, this was something that it's from my earliest memories. I remember having nightmares regularly, having revenge fantasies, having hatred of Germany and Germans. I remember when I went to see the Indiana Jones and the Lost and the Ark, the first Indiana Jones movie, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and being as a 7-year-old and being very surprised that that Indiana Jones was against the Nazis. You know, I just thought that Nazis just had a beef with Jews, that it's not anybody else's story, but the Jewish story. But I remember seeing the movie and being surprised that they were the bad guys for Americans. So as a kid, I developed a sort of obsession with the Holocaust. And the Holocaust was always presented as something that's not only in the past. There is an option that it can always happen at any moment, and it can come back again. And you see this, if you want to see people expressing this kind of reaction two Holocaust narratives. I highly recommend a documentary movie by the name of Defamation, made by my friend Yoav Shamir. And it is free on YouTube in Yoav Shamir Films. It's called Defamation, and it is very entertaining and funny. So at some point in my 20s, after years of gazing into the Holocaust, I switched my gaze into the horrible, into being obsessed with cults and learning about cults. Because instead of this Holocaust trauma, I could look at a much more diverse set of traumas that we see in cults. And that has led me on a long journey and long intellectual journey into first writing a master's, then a PhD, and I'm writing a book about aspects of cult psychology and how we explain cults and what's going on with cults. But on my path, I learned a lot about awe and about trauma and about the effects that those can have, and effects that I see in the way people remember the Holocaust. So let's take a segue now, take a detour, and I will talk about awe, the emotion awe, A-W-E. It's a strange sounding word. And my argument in my book, which will hopefully come out next year, is that awe is closely related to the emotion of love, and that strong awe experiences of the kind that can induce a religious conversion are closely related to the psychological event of falling in love. Specifically, it most resembles falling in love with a baby. So, which can happen involuntarily. Someone can put a baby on your doorstep, and it can change your life drastically. So, again, it's an emotion. If it is, okay. So this emotion and its relation to the emotion of love is central to what I'm going to be arguing here. So let's take a look at this falling in love with a baby. So what happens? The baby is the trigger, but it creates a psychological event that allows a person to change their life drastically, to undergo a transformation. Of course, because now there's a baby. It allows you to change all the priorities, what's important, what's not important. It creates a commitment. This commitment is irrational in the sense that it's not based on cost-benefit considerations. It gives people a sense of meaning and a sense of purpose. It creates a special sense of certainty regarding what you need, that you need to take care of the baby. It gives you an idealized view of the baby or the person that that baby starts becoming. It gives you blind spots regarding faults with the baby. It gives you a sensitivity to criticism of the baby, and it causes black and white thinking. So all of these, as we'll see, and a few others, are the effects that strong awe experiences can have. So when a person has a strong awe experience, which can be triggered by a number of ways, trauma is one, a miracle is another, a celebrity would induce awe. If someone that you consider a celebrity, you can get it through emotional contagion. You can get it from stuff that's sufficiently impressive, right? You can be in awe of someone that's really good at what they're doing. Or by beauty, all sorts of things can induce awe. Things that are judged by a person to be sufficiently anomalous, but trauma is certainly one of them. So now the effects of awe if it passes a certain threshold, is the possibility to undergo a religious conversion. So that's we see in cults most clearly. And so you go to the ashram or you go to the church, you have a very, very strong awe experience, and now you're either born again if you're previously a believer already, or you get a new faith. But that faith comes with all sorts of effects that the event allows you to change your life drastically, undergo a transformation. It gives you a strong feelings of knowing, a strong sense of certainty regarding whatever it is the experience proved. But when I say that the experience proved something, this is a strange thing because experiences shouldn't be proofs. But we can see this, for example, when a person sees a miracle and they have a strong awe experience, undergo a religious conversion, that there often is no connection between the miracle and the conclusion that the person got from the miracle. So if we take the example of people seeing Jesus walking on the water, sort of the textbook miracle, we see even in the Christian Bible, we have the story of the people seeing him, thinking that what they're seeing is a ghost, and saying that the event proves that ghosts exist. And then Jesus makes it to the boat and tells them, no, it actually doesn't prove that ghosts exist. It's me, Jesus. But a person walking on the water could be a proof that aliens have landed. It could be a proof that we're living in a simulation. It can be a proof that Islam is correct or that Buddhism is correct. It can be a proof of things that are completely unrelated to the buoyancy of Jesus. If we want a more Jewish example, since, it's, we can say that people who saw Moses part the Red Sea, and this is before there's a Bible, and because of the miraculous nature of the event, they feel a strong sense of awe, and they come to the conclusion that they really do need to cut their penis, because that's what the Jewish God wants people to do. But what's important is not only that there is no connection between the awe experience and what caused it and the conclusion that people draw from the awe experience, and we'll get to the Holocaust examples soon, is that people don't notice that there's no connection. For them, it makes absolute natural sense. Obviously, how can you tell me Christianity wasn't proved? I saw a person walking on the water. I saw water turn into wine, and that can prove obviously that. And there's a lot more to say about it, but with this sense of certainty and sense that the emotional experience proved something, just like in the related experience of becoming a parent, adopting a baby, it comes with a commitment, comes with a sense of meaning and purpose. It comes with a special sense of certainty. That which is proved by an awe experience is felt to be really real. So this is not regularly real. And in the case of religious conversion, also you have an idealized view of what it is you converted to, the sense of blind spots regarding faults, sensitivity to criticism. It comes with black and white thinking. And in this case, it also comes with thought-terminating cliches. And thought-terminating cliches are words that everybody thinks that they understand what they mean. For example, freedom, as George Bush said, they hate us for our freedom, even though freedom, nobody knows what the word freedom is. There's many, many, many theories of freedom. But So it comes with thought terminating cliches, which are words that we manipulate ourselves with. So some awe, some level of awe can strengthen one's faith, but a sufficient level of awe can lead to a conversion, a change in faith. Now, that seems like a paradox, but if you see that also in the case of love, in the case of romantic love, we see that some dose of the emotion of love can strengthen a relationship or a family, but a sufficiently strong emotion of love in the right circumstances with the right situation can be how a family breaks apart when someone falls in love with someone else, right? And so some awe can strengthen your faith, but enough awe can make you convert to another faith. But that we'll see. So already mentioned some of the things that induce awe, but awe is very commonly used to strengthen, for example, commitment to a country. And so patriotic feelings many times are induced by awe. And awe is, of course, I didn't mention this, but it's closely related to vastness, to the feeling of vastness. But we see that even, for example, national narratives, but I mean also religious narratives, use trauma to induce awe, to strengthen people commitment and faith in some sense. So in national myths, we see this in the focus of national tragedies. In the United States, this is, for example, the Battle of the Alamo, which until recently was very, and Custer's Last Stand and Pearl Harbor. And there's this focus. I mean, there's a lot of people that don't know anything about the the history of Texas or the Mexican-American wars, except for the Battle of the Alamo, which is not even part of the Mexican-American wars. But we see how inducing trauma now in the case of Christianity, of course, the traumatizing narrative, which is the crucifixion of Jesus, is front and center to the religion, and this horrific vision of a person being tortured on a cross is central, and that is one of the ways that awe is induced. But of course, there's many others. There's the beauty of the text, the beauty of the buildings, the vastness of the buildings, the stories, its vast history, etc., etc. So I'll just take another minute to talk about how I think that we need to think about cult members. Is cult members regularly they are portrayed in the media as gullible and idiots, and they should have seen it. But I think that we need to think of them as parents to abusive children that abuse their parents and are horrible. And the cult members, they don't see the criminality of their child. The parents of a Hitler, of a Charles Manson, they might not see the criminality of the child. They might have a sensitivity to criticism. They might have blind spots. They have an idealized view. All those things, they're willing to put up. They're devastated if that child that abuses them dies. And you see that the type of giving that cult members gives to their cult is like parents to children, not children to parents. So when you join the cult, many times the cult leader is a parental figure, but the cult itself is a child figure. So, all right, that is the end of the segue, and we can get back to the Holocaust. So, Holocaust narratives in especially the Jewish Holocaust, the Holocaust we're talking about, really attempts to traumatize people. And I'm not criticizing this. I feel like I suffered a lot in my childhood from this trauma and this ever presence of the Holocaust. And, as a kid, if I didn't get any chocolate, I would think to myself, well, it's better than, being in Auschwitz. But I don't think that's a healthy way to grow up. But I understand that the part of Holocaust education and memory is to induce trauma, and I mean, hopefully, it's traumatizing adults and not children. But the trauma is particularly effective because Holocaust narratives don't just tell you what happened; they tell you what it felt like as it happened. So when I was in the Armenian Holocaust Museum, everything there was about just what happened. There was no mention of what it felt like as it was happening. But if you go to Yad Vashem, the Israeli Holocaust Museum, or other Holocaust museums, there is a lot of focus on what it felt like and what it was like to be packed in a cattle car, and et cetera, et cetera. I won't don't want to trigger anybody, but also the movies, they have a certain sense of realism, of course, and there's the footage, and so there is a lot of this focus, which I think is particularly traumatizing. But because it causes trauma, that trauma induces the emotion of awe, and that emotion of awe has many of the effects that are already mentioned in the context of conversion. So it can induce a transformation, and as we saw earlier in the conference, there's a talk about Israeli teenagers that go to Poland and they talk about how transformative the experience was, and I think that makes sense, and that's natural. It makes people feel that the Holocaust is somehow really real, that it's more fundamental part of reality. And that makes it very easy for people to think that genocide against the Jews is the natural state, which is how I grew up. That we must actively push away a genocide. That if we only stopped pushing it away, obviously all the Gentiles would just immediately try to murder all the Jews again, because that's what happens. Is what you get from Holocaust narratives. And the threat of the next Holocaust is felt like as if it is really real, as it is certain, it's behind any corner. And that's why for Israelis and some others, everything is the Holocaust, right? Saddam Hussein was the Holocaust. We must go to the Iraq War because that prevents the next Holocaust. As Shimon Peres, Israeli former prime minister, said, Iran is building a flying gas chamber. When he talked about Iran building nuclear weapons. So, and of course, and October 7th, there's a lot of Holocaust narratives. Of course, this is at the same time that people are said that nothing can be ever compared to the Holocaust. So we already see this contradiction, or a little bit of a contradiction. The idealized view that comes with strong awe experience, it many times is directed towards either the Jewish people or the state of Israel. Now, notice that the lack of connection between the awe experience and the conclusion you draw from it, the why the same miracle can prove Islam and Christianity and Hinduism, still doesn't tell you how do you know which one it proves. But that is a whole different subject, and it involves priming and expectations and assumptions. But we see that in many depictions of the Holocaust, for example, in the Yad Vashem Museum or in movies such as Schindler's List, there is a very explicit connection between the Holocaust and the state of Israel as the guarantor that there will be no future Holocaust. So the state of Israel is sort of like a Holocaust antidote, which is, you know, can be something that is felt to be really real. And so it also comes with an idealized view of Israel, an idealized view of Jewish people. It can come with black and white thinking. So, for example, there might be people who say that there are people who support Jews and people who don't support Jews, and the people that don't support Jews are Nazis. Therefore, I'm not a Nazi, so I'm going to support Jews or support the state of Israel. Because if you don't support the state of Israel, then you are a Nazi or an anti-Semite, even though logically. But as I mentioned, people don't notice that there's no connection between what caused awe and the conclusion that you get from an awe experience. So that is why some people might go to a Holocaust memorial event and think that the conclusion should be that we should not have race-exclusive countries or that we should not discriminate. But you can also come with that we should support Jewish-exclusive countries and people in Israel. Israel supported apartheid South Africa, and I think that for many people, they said, well, apartheid. We wish we would have suffered apartheid in World War II. Apartheid's easy compared to what we experienced, and you get that sentiment in that movie Defamation, which I will talk about a little later. So this Holocaust trauma, it can give people a sense of meaning and purpose. I think that historically it was for people who are particularly affected by it, they would channel it towards Nazi hunting. So there used to be a profession called a Nazi hunter, people who searched for criminals, Nazi criminals, usually in South America. And that was a good place where you can channel this trauma. To today, that there's no longer Nazi hunting, I think many people are directed towards neoconservative ideology. But the blind spots that come with the strong awe experience, the idealized view and the blind spots, but they make it so that you can have completely contradictory conclusions out of the Holocaust. So, for example, in Israel, there is this notion of the silent Holocaust. And the silent Holocaust is referred to as something that happens whenever Jews marry non-Jews. So because that dilutes the Jewish essence, the blood or whatever, then that's also a Holocaust, which is why Golda Meir famously, the former prime minister of Israel, famously said that any Jew that marries a non-Jew joins the 6 million who died in the Holocaust. So as you can see, that is, the demand of reproductive isolation. And this is not personal. This is not saying that she only wants to marry other Jews, but she says that all Jews should marry other Jews. Otherwise, they're adding people to the 6 million who died in the Holocaust. And that is, the demand of reproductive isolation is one of the hallmarks of racism. So you can see how the Holocaust in this case, in Golda Meir's case, was an argument for racism, Jewish supremacist racism, but still, while for others, Holocaust narratives can be an argument against racism. So the fact that the Holocaust can have such different reactions and such different conclusions and such different certainty regarding it's obvious what the Holocaust means is evident in how before 1962 and after 1967, the Holocaust was depicted extremely differently. So before 62, and then between 62 and 67, you have this transitional period. But in 62, you have the Adolf Eichmann trials. So in 67 was an Israeli war against its neighbors where there was a great victory. But before 62, people in Israel and Jews in general were ashamed of the Holocaust. They thought the Holocaust was showing that Jews are weak, that Jews don't have any solidarity with each other. They looked at any Holocaust survivor and asked, why did he survive? Did he collaborate? Was he a collaborator? Why did my relatives didn't survive and this guy did survive? Maybe this guy collaborated in a way that caused my... So people didn't talk about the Holocaust. People were ashamed. And then after 62, when it got in the news, there was a lot of people were traumatized. A lot of people heard stories of the Holocaust for the first time. And then after 67, the Holocaust became something that Israel wants people to know about. So if before that they were ashamed and saw it as an evidence of weakness, now the same Holocaust is used in a way that Israel demands that everybody must learn about it. Everybody must talk to Holocaust survivors. Holocaust survivors are seen as, the purest victims, and the Jewish people are the ultimate victims. If we have the victim Olympiad, then the Jews win because of the Holocaust. And they get the sensitivity to criticism, but also sensitivity to comparison. Whenever some other genocide is compared to the Holocaust, of course, and in the movie Defamation, you see the head of the former head of the Anti-Defamation League, and he goes to Ukraine to tell them that they should not compare the Holodor, the starvation in 32, 33 to the Holocaust, because that's not okay. Now, when I was a kid, I was disappointed that I didn't have any survivors. And in my family, I was very jealous of a friend of mine. This is probably, when I'm 10 years old, that his grandmother, crawled out of a shooting pit. And I was like, oh yeah, my grandmother was in the English army, that's not. But, a friend of mine, her ancestors came from Iraq. And she told me that she went home after a Holocaust survivor came to school and talked to them. And she asked her grandfather about where he was in the Holocaust. And he told her that he was in Baghdad and that there was no Holocaust there. And so she was disappointed, which I think is incredible that Israeli kids, and I remember myself being jealous of a kid who had horrible stories. Now, in Israel, whenever a diplomat enters the country with a diplomatic passport, by law, they're not allowed to leave until they went to Yad Vashem museum, even if they've been there many times. There are diplomats who come for like a couple of hour meeting, and then they run through the Yad Vashem so they can leave the country. Israel is building a Holocaust museum and they're building a big military base. And it's going to have its own Holocaust museum because the Holocaust museum is used as an argument and the Holocaust of things that are not related to the Holocaust. So to finish my talk, I will just say I'll show a segment from the defamation documentary. I think it's really a fantastic documentary. It follows it's one part of it. The documentary is about anti-Semitism, and one part of it, he joins a group of Israeli teenagers that go to Poland on a tour of the Holocaust. He joins a group of anti-defamation league that go to the Ukraine to tell them that not to compare their tragedies to the Holocaust. He goes to America, to the ADL, and he also goes to the Israeli Knesset. It's really fascinating, but there's really fantastic parts. For example, when he goes with the group of teenagers and they go and they're at the first death camp, I think they're in Majdanek, and a girl comes to the guy that is the guide, and she complains that she's not having an emotional experience. She's not having a breakdown. She's there, and it's just normal. And then that guide calls my friend, the documentary filmmaker, and says, "Okay, pay attention to her because she's going to have a breakdown. She's going to have an emotional breakdown at the end." And that happens, and you see it. It's very, but it's fun. It's a fun documentary. So let me show you a couple of minutes of it, and then we'll get to questions and answers. So I will share this screen. And hopefully we will have, so this is a group of people that are going to the ADL that are in Ukraine, and they went to the Babi Yar Memorial.
I think the worst thing for me, standing here, is that it could happen today.
Oh, God.
I agree.
Yeah.
I can see people being marched out of Kiev and shot
Marilyn, I
by
need to-
some people who would decide that's the thing to do.
That's right.
Maybe they do it to gays. Maybe they do it to
That's why we have to
Russia,
support Israel.
whatever.
Israel's our insurance policy.
Yes, in a minute. Good for you, I tend to say. In a minute. Because as far as I'm concerned, without Israel, there isn't a safe Jew in the world. That's the way I feel.
I agree. I agree.
So you have two people who immediately move to Israel if you have a problem.
Right.
If Israel needs, you have two people
I
right there.
joined the army. They wouldn't take an old lady, but I would be there. I'd roll bandages.
He's
I
asking,
don't know.
he's asking a question, the
Does
journalist.
that mean that you're more loyal to Israel then?
No, of course not.
That's right.
So
Of course
how
not.
do you like coexist these two notions?
How do I like what?
How these two notions coexist? The fact that
Easy. You love your children, you love your husband. You love your friends equally.
Do you love your children more than you love your husband?
Of course not.
Sometimes.
But you might die for your children before
You know,
you would die for your husband.
It's like the question then.
You
if
might.
you were in a
Israel is the
lifeboat,
husband or the kids?
I'm sorry?
Israel is the husband or the kids?
The kids.
The kids.
The kids. Yeah, the kids. The
Israel's not a
love for
child
Israel
anymore.
is love for a child. There's a love for a child that different than a love for a husband. There's nothing like really a love for a child.
it's a much more protective.
Right.
No, it's a much more. Okay.
According to the ADL mission members, Israel is a child which needs their support, but is also their insurance policy in case something terrible should ever happen again. But at this particular moment, this insurance policy was busy being a teenager, making its way to Majdanek concentration camp near Lublin.
Okay, so that's the end. We saw here a lot of the things I talked about, but let's see if there's any questions.
Dr. Laor, thank you so much for that. What I absolutely love about your discussion is that you're not shying away from the controversial, which really is the name of the game at GCRR. We want to discuss the stuff and have the hard, difficult conversations that other people aren't going to have. And sadly, academia is not allowing for such free and expression sometimes. Not always, but so one, I absolutely love that. And I think it is really, really interesting. And I'm mulling it over, but as I sit here, I think I'm on the side of saying, yeah, I can easily see any victimhood mentality turning into a cult or a cult-like indoctrination and conditioning. So not just the Holocaust, but it could be slavery. It could be, those two things pop into my mind immediately just because of stuff that I've been teaching lately in class. Yeah, so I think you're onto something when you say it has cult-like qualities to it.
Yes, and remember that I'm not arguing that the seeing someone walking on the water could actually be because Christianity is correct. Coming to the conclusions that people come from a Holocaust, seeing Schindler's List and thinking that that proves that Zionism is good, that doesn't mean that Zionism is not good. It just means that that's not the argument to get there.
Well, yes, and just the intensity, the intense attachment to that as part of your identity.
Yeah.
We actually discussed this yesterday in one of the presentations, that if somebody is, if victimhood is all their entire identity, and if it really is the only argument that they can give for the existence of the state of Israel or something like that, it's
there's other arguments, but yeah, that's the ultimate argument.
But it seems, I think to your point, it really seems like that shouldn't be the only one. And it may not even be a very good one.
Yep.
If your entire identity is wrapped up in a genocide. Something I want to push back on a little bit here. And so I'm kind of hoping you can help me with this. I was shocked to hear what you said, that prior to the 6-Day War, the Holocaust was not really discussed and mentioned. And if it was, there was deep shame and embarrassment. I kind of wish you would have had a presentation with some citations or something, or evidence for this. So how do you know that that's true? And how can I verify that?
Well, first of all, I can find you the sources, and it's before 62. So between 62 to 67, you have this transition. But I've talked about this to history professors. I heard it from friends of mine who are history professors, and it's something that I know from my grandparents, there's a lot of people that were and also books about Israel in the 50s. This is something that it's not really a big secret, and it sort of makes sense. I mean, it's I mean, I can find you many citations, but in Israel, Holocaust survivors right after the war were all seen, looked at suspiciously. It's very tragic, and many of them never talked about what happened and never talked about what they did. But it's you know, the gray zone, the book chapter by Levy, who talked a lot about how Jews were running the crematorium and that there's moral. I mean, this was something that was very present in the mind of Israelis, and especially Ashkenazi Israelis in the 50s. And also, it was part of Zionism's proof that the diaspora Judaism was not as good as Zionism. So Zionism is a muscular Judaism, but the ones that think the Jews belong in Europe, or that they can live in Europe, that is the diaspora mentality, and the diaspora mentality is what made them go like sheep to the slaughter and this and that. So it is, but it says a lot that this is something that, as an Israeli, was not even something that I thought needed a citation, but as an
Well,
American,
yeah.
through a Holocaust conference, this is something that will never be mentioned. Yeah.
Well, you know, and I do trust your abilities as a researcher, and I do trust your that this has been your experience. But yeah, for sure, telling me it's common knowledge isn't going to cut it.
No, yeah, of course. But I can find you the citation.
And
I can ask my
would like
professor.
to-
He'll give you. There's a lot about that.
Yeah, well, and I would love to see kind of. I guess I don't even know what this might entail, but I guess I would love to see some kind of I don't know how I'm wanting to phrase this. I keep wanting to say empirical evidence, but I don't really know how you can do that. But an example, I would like to see a concrete example of prior to 1962, people not talking about it or shying away from it or being shamed and embarrassed. If nothing else, just a news article or a TV interview. I don't know, something.
Yeah.
So yeah, I trust you'll get me the stuff because I would really be fascinated.
Yeah.
So help me understand the transition. I want to assume, for the sake of argument, that you're 100% right about that. 1962 to 1967 is a fairly dramatic transition where the Holocaust is now being used as a bit of an apologetic device.
Yeah, but it's when the Jew in 67, the Jews were the victors. Now, of course, they call it the 6-Day War, but it's a war that's still the war we're in today. You know, so you can call it the 56th-day war, year war. But the Eichmann trial. So before that, a lot of Jews didn't know. I mean, they knew in general, they heard stories, but it wasn't spoken. It wasn't spoken about. And in 62 was the Eichmann trial, where everybody heard the stories that we hear today. Everybody heard, and this was from young people. This was from very graphic, of course. But it was, Israel is now in a position of strength. We captured the monster, Adolf Eichmann, and who was executed. And now we are in a position of strength, and not in 67, we were super, you know, the US can't win in Vietnam, and we beat all our neighbors in 6 days, you know, and even though the US years is dragging its feet in Vietnam, and look how great we are. And so the Holocaust. Now, in America, also the 1978 miniseries called Holocaust was extremely pivotal as well, because that was the first time Americans saw the Holocaust on their television. But it was something that, first of all, there were a lot of Holocaust survivors who the rest of their life didn't talk about what happened. So it's not after 67, some of them, never talked about it. But it was something that was, it became what it is today. And today it's, I grew up with Holocaust jokes,
Would it be fair to say that the argument is for many, the Holocaust is being weaponized, or they are weaponizing it to galvanize for political purposes and for military purposes?
Yeah,
Is
and
the argument?
if you look at every World War I movie, they're all anti-war, and every World War II movie is pro-war. The argument why we must have a strong army is because we might need to fight some Nazis again. The reason why we need to go and do regime change is because Saddam is the next Hitler. So yeah, I think that anytime negotiation with someone else is always appeasement, which is a term.
Hitler, yeah.
And Munich, and it's 38 all over again. And if we let Libya if we don't bomb them, then we're appeasing. And we need to not make the mistake of 38, which is have peace. So and what's interesting is that every World War I narrative is always anti-war, because that's a stupid war. We shouldn't have had the war. Militarism is bad. World War II is always militarism is good, because we'll need to stop a Holocaust.
Yeah, and that's why one of the things I appreciate about this talk is, if it is in fact being weaponized, that's scary, and that is not good.
You mean like the Israeli speaker at the UN coming there with a yellow star on his jacket, like he did a few weeks ago?
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that. Interesting. Well, I recall a lot of 9/11 events being weaponized, right?
Absolutely. And 9/11 is classic. And
Right.
there's no connection between 9/11 and Iraq, but people didn't notice.
Well, and I have no doubt that in the future, people are going to be able to have a way better hindsight of how 9/11, the trauma of it, got weaponized, so that we'd all be beating a war path, war drums. I have two questions, but I want to follow up with what I was talking about just a second ago. But I guess for me, I hear the argument that this is potentially, if not, it is, being weaponized in a manipulative way. I guess my pushback is, it seems valid still. The Holocaust is the worst human atrocity. And it was clear that after, the 19th and 20th century of pogroms and now the Holocaust, Jews need a home, because holy crap, they're not safe. How is that? So I'm not sure if it is being weaponized, it seems like a valid thing, similar to saying, we need to lock all the cockpits in the airplanes now after 9/11. Well, why? Because 9/11.
Yeah.
What's the likelihood of that happening again? I don't know. I don't want to take a chance.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really bad analogy. I know that. What do you think about that pushback? There's validity to this?
Yeah, and I think it's I agree with it. I think that Israel, because of the Holocaust, because of the historic history, should be a place that that accepts Jews if they are being persecuted. So when nobody in the world would accept Jews, if Israel could be some place that does accept if they're prosecuted. But and in 1948, people say that the creation of Israel was like someone jumping out of a burning building and landing on someone that's walking down the street. And so the Jews were leaving the burning building of Europe, but they landed on the Palestinians who were walking down the street. But in 1967, anything beyond that role of Israel, so for Israel to be a Jewish supremacist state, or for that does, so you can take the argument to locking cockpits. You can't take the argument to killing 1 million Iraqis. You can take the argument for Israel being a refuge for Jews, but not for creating an apartheid state.
Interesting. Okay. Can you help me understand the genetic link here? Because I'm still confused about this. Are we saying is the argument that during the 1962 Eichmann trial and execution, that is when the Holocaust, the messaging of the Holocaust started to be weaponized towards?
No. That was when it was like exposed to the world and to the people living in Israel. People living in Israel, they knew that 6 million people died. They knew that, other than, today, the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, for example, became a very strong part of the narrative, but back then it was, a very tiny part of the narrative as it was historically. So it was, and also there was enough distance from the Holocaust. There was, people weren't looking, and this also comes with a strong wave of anti-Polish sentiment in Israel. In the 60s, Israel and Poland, two of the most heavily victimized places that were suffered in World War II, had a very a strong awakening of mutual hatred. So there was a big anti-Semitic wave in Poland in the 60s and an anti-Polish wave in Israel. But the Holocaust became something that people talk about in 1962, and it became something that Israel insists on everybody knowing about gradually after 1967.
Would it be fair to say that because of the Eichmann trial and kind of now a firsthand witness exposing the atrocities in more graphic detail, that because of that, an entire nation was re-traumatized, and that they started to respond to that trauma?
Yeah. I think that if you look at it as in the context of just the psychology of trauma, you can say that there was amnesia for the first period until 1962. That there was an attempt to not talk about it. There was an attempt to push it away. But yeah, I think that and you see it in the defamation movie, but the um, there was the systematic traumatizing of people in Israel. So in the Holocaust Memorial Day, where all the media switches to Holocaust narratives, and all the schools, that's and they have a minute of the air raid sirens play for a minute, and everybody needs to stand, and people pull over with their cars, and they stand outside their cars, and so you have this collective effect and emotional contagion. But all the movies that and then on Holocaust Memorial Day you'll watch the movies, and it's the Gray Zone, and then it's the Son of Soul, and then it's I luckily, when I grew up, there was a lot fewer Holocaust movies, and they weren't quite as good. I think that if I was a kid that was, if I was a 9-year-old today, I would have watched all the Holocaust movies that we have today, and some of them are extremely well done and good and traumatizing, as they should be. But I would have been a lot more traumatized probably, because I had, Escape from Sobibor. I had whatever. I watched Shoah, the movie, and Shoah, the movie, is a movie that doesn't tell you what happened. There's no mention of World War II, a 9-hour movie. But and the museums got a lot better. I think that when I went to Holocaust Museum, the Yad Vashem as a school kid, it wasn't as good as it is today. And of course, the museum in Washington is really really effective.
Couple more questions.
Yeah.
I'm shocked again to hear that nobody knew the details, the graphic details.
Of course, people who wanted to know knew, and people who could ask their family members that were survivors if they were Ashkenazi. But of course, people knew, and there were politicians talked about it. Menachem Begin, another one of Israel's prime ministers, didn't give a single speech in his political life that didn't mention the Holocaust. But the Holocaust was mentioned as 6 million, as something that the Nazis did. There was a big argument in Israel early on about whether or not to accept money from Germany, which of course at the end they did accept money from Germany. But the stance towards the Holocaust was completely different. So people knew about it, they knew the basic facts, but they didn't know what it felt like to be in a cattle car packed with 200 other people.
Almost as if you had it sounds to me like a major distinction is prior to the Holocaust being weaponized, and I'm just using it for the sake of just getting my thought out, but prior to it being weaponized by certain people, the facts of the case, the facts of the Holocaust is what was discussed or knew.
Yeah, what happened, but not how it felt like as it was happening.
Once it got weaponized, the push is to instill that sense of awe, the manipulative awe.
Through trauma. Yeah.
Okay. In order basically to create would it be fair to say that the goal would be to create generations of Holocaust victims, not descendants?
That's not the goal. The goal would be to support awareness, to make sure it doesn't happen again. All the goals there was always good intention behind this. I don't think there was ever conscious manipulation too much. But even when Golda Meir says whatever Jew marries a non-Jew joins the 6 million, I think for her, she's not consciously saying it to manipulate. For her, it's obvious. For her, it's not manipulation. It's just the truth.
Okay. So maybe weaponized isn't the right word then, because I think when I say weaponize, I
Mhm.
think of the
manip-
narrative
in-
intentionally being hijacked.
Yeah. No.
Uh,
So I mean, who knows? Probably, if anything, that would have started happening just in the last, the later, the more. But it's. I think that in most cases, people just think that it's good, that people will draw. People also assume that the person who watches Schindler's List will, or watches The Gray Zone, or watches whatever movie, that they will come to the conclusion that the filmmaker has, which is usually anti-racist conclusion. But with the way it is used by some, so the Holocaust is like the miracle that the person walking on the water, the thing that's not related to the conclusion that people come to it, but it's so assumed. People so assume that, oh, a person walked on the water, Christianity proved. They think that I'll show the Holocaust and they'll come to the same conclusion that I came to from the Holocaust, that Jews should be able to live wherever they want, or that Jews should not be live in outside of Israel, and both of those are just so natural to the person who presents the consumes the Holocaust narrative, that I don't think there's even people to even entertain the possibility that this narrative could be used as an argument for something else.
Okay, that is a really helpful distinction and nuance. Okay. I think that's where I was missing some of this.
Okay.
I have no doubt that certain political leaders do in fact weaponize it. But politicians, that's their that's what politicians do.
Yeah.
But as a whole, it sounds like instead of saying it can be it's being weaponized, rather it's an unintended consequence could
Mhm.
be or is extreme nationalism or militarism or something or something akin to racism.
Yeah. So an Israeli kid that's, a 9-year-old I mean, I was a Jewish supremacist at that age, who thinks that, that obviously Israel is, as the woman is the insurance policy, but it's also a child that we need to nourish. And that's funny. He says, I guess my country is both a child and an insurance policy, but, you know, but they will watch a movie like, for example, The Gray Zone, and the movie is intended to present an anti-racist, war message. And the kid in Israel would watch that movie and just get a completely different message from it.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, that if we give some non-Jews the rights in Israel, then another Holocaust will happen automatically.
Thank you so much for bringing this. Bringing this to the surface. I think this is valuable. This is really valuable. It's controversial.
Thanks for having me.
But I very much appreciate this. Tell me the name of the documentary again.
So it's called Defamation.
Okay.
And it is by director Yoav Shamir, Y-O-A-V, Shamir, S-H-M-I-R, or S-H-A-M-I-R. And it's on his YouTube page, Yoav Shamir Films. And it is really, really funny. It's full, I mean, it's about anti-Semitism, but it's really hilarious in many parts. And it's entertaining, and it has some parts that are more serious and somber, but there is a lot of humor in it, and it's really fun.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much again for doing this. And I will expect those citations are coming. In the meantime, thank you to everybody who is watching this being streamed and attending. And Yuval, I'll hand it over to you for the last word.
Thanks for having me. it's an opportunity to say something that I assume that other people don't say. So thanks, and I